Hello, welcome to Unfinished Thoughts with Yolanda Yu. As the name suggests, that it is the unfinished thoughts that I have been continually gathering in that entire week. And actually, where the name came from was that some years ago when I was coaching a group, and there was one holding room where all of the coaches would sit together and the head coach would debrief us. So the head coach gave us one requirement. Please stop the session before people finish thinking. Because the moment human beings stop or finish thinking, they start to think those thoughts are truth and those thoughts are classmates' zone. And why I started this podcast today is that now it's already 9:40 p.m. in Singapore, and then usually my newsletter is always going out on Friday, so today's Thursday, and I need to have it out by 6:30 a.m. tomorrow, which means I have to schedule it tonight. So, and I don't have time to organize my thoughts, put them in nice words, and even consider the layout and images. So then this question came to my mind. Is it that my unorganized or unfinished thoughts is it less valuable than the organized one? Perhaps not, because when in that process of organizing thoughts, I might have brought in more biases. And yeah, might also sound like a defense, by the way. Um, so that because I'm late for my homework, right? Anyhow, today's topic is specificity. I've only known the word specific. I've never, I live in this word specificity, which is quite a mouthful word. Last year, when I attended this theater training at a place called Split Theater, if you are interested, you have to get just check them out. Um, so how that goes is that first of all, I didn't have any kind of theater training. I was not an actress, but then I was going onto the stage to do this improvisation kind of performance. And so when I started out, if I were to perform as act as an old lady, all I could think of was a backpack, walking with discomfort. But then later, when I was partnering up with one of the real ladies, and she was acting as a very young girl, and I was acting as the old lady. And I just couldn't really conceptually get to what it's all about, right? And my facilitator said, Yolanda, try to feel you are carrying a huge rock, which is ridiculous, right? Why would any old lady actually carry a huge mountain kind of rock? But I still did that. And the moment I did that, I got into the specificity where suddenly I could be really, really under a lot of stress. And I felt all of my joints were aching and I couldn't stand straight. And what's more was that I saw myself, I knew I was panting. It was so heavy that I couldn't. I just wanted to save some breath. So I kept my my communication really brief. And I was also bent, but not in a earlier way as I could have imagined. So that's what happens when we are in touch with specificity. All of our behaviors, our tactics, our whole being shifts towards that specificity. And you might wonder why does that even matter? This is, I am an executive coach. I talk about career and stuff. Why am I talking about acting? And I think that's important to notice that when we are in the corporate world, specificity is so important in almost everything. One is about communications, right? I mean, if I'm talking about things that's not to the client, people will get annoyed. Like, okay, you can talk about leadership, you can talk about career, but what exactly are you trying to get at? Right. So that is why specificity is so important. If you're going to especially going to the boardroom or you going to a meeting with any senior folks, they are going to not be that patient if you beat around the bush, you move around topics and people don't get the idea of what exactly you are getting at. Then similarly for personal branding, um, if we are not specific, we can't be distinct. So one thing is about a lot of people will put out their CV saying, I am a sales professional with 20 years of work experience in this particular domain. And that is not at all specific, right? Because there would be how would you be different from another person who is also sales, who has been working for 20 years in similar domain, right? What's important is, however, not to add those details such as I live in Red Hill and that I have, a pair of twins. There's not specificity at the functional level. We need specificity at different levels, which I try to introduce a bit later. Um, so coming back to the concept that it is, however, indisputable that it's important for communications, for personal branding, and for strategy. And again, strategy is a way of thinking. It's not just PowerPoint slides. So it is if we are able to strategically think, the likelihood of us strategically communicate and talk about things that are succinct and that are concise and that are impactful, then that chance is higher. So coming back to then what's the definition of specificity? I would like to call it that it is we are so deeply connected to this particular thing, not anything else that's similar to it. So repeat, specificity is we are very deeply connected to a particular thing, but not anything else that is similar to this thing. And I hope you kind of get a little bit of the idea here. Shall I example on that old lady, right? If I am not connected to a particular old lady who is at this moment carrying a giant rock, then it's not specificity. On a similar note, I could be connected to another old lady who is, although she's 90, but she's still really cute and she has a laughter like a baby and she actually can jump around. And by the way, I've seen a lady like that who jumps around, running around like a little rabbit with her hands in front of her chest, right? So that's about specificity and the character comes alive, the idea comes alive, and the brand comes alive. And and another example would be about when we go to, let's say, GP, we go to general practitioner to see if we have generally, I mean, I'm not trying to say doctors are useless, but a lot of times, if we are painful here, we are painful there, in the end, whether you have stomach ache or, headache, you may get the same similar kind of painkiller, right? Uh, Again, I'm very stereotypical here. I do know we have different kind of painkillers, but if you go into a specialist who is specialized in the brain or specialized in nose or any part of the body, it's going to be a lot more nuanced, right? Just another example. So as a coach, I listen to a lot of people say dilemma or struggles, and an untrained here would, when we hear our friends come to us with dilemmas, with struggles, we're going to treat them similarly, right? Because we don't differentiate one struggle from another type of struggle. But just as I, today I'm just going for my master class, and there we could easily identify 20 or 30 types of different lemons with different textures and flavors. And how do we actually work with our clients to tackle those sort of stuckness and get stuck and get moving? Because all dilemmas are different in our eyes, but it could be something very similar in untrained people's eyes. And that means that a lot of times for us to be more specific, we need learning. And when we learn, we get into the nuances, we get to be able to differentiate patterns. And that's how AI is learned as well. So the more data we get, more understanding of things, we start to be able to get into specificities, right? So, for example, if someone who is not familiar with what startup is or entrepreneurship is, they are going to come up with a very vague idea talking about, I know, it's going to be super tired. I know it's going to feel like your own boss. I know it's quite stressful. And then I know maybe it will fail, right? So that's usually what people understand or imagine entrepreneurship to be. But as I have worked with a lot of startup founders, and I myself have founded a few different businesses, and I'm also an investor. Um, to me, there are startups who actually support your lifestyle. For example, I'm a solopreneur, right? And that support my lifestyle, or rather, I'm evolving it every day as I like. And there are also startups that are not essentially, in a the kind of stress, the same kind of stress as you always imagine to be. Some startups are thriving in terms of their income. They already are very stable with revenue flow. And then there are some startups that are not making money, but they have a great business plan that they are ready in the space, they're comfortable in the space of building their MVPs and getting things out. And they're not in a rush because they do have a lot of investors queuing up, but they choose to bootstrap, right? So I'm not trying to go into the depth of a startup, but you can see once we know more, we can get more specific, and then we will be able to across different levels to talk about it. Uh, whether it's in a very high level or in more details. And so learning makes us specific, and with that, we can also be much more intentional. One example is leadership styles. For example, I work with people on influencing styles, and there are multiple different types. And the moment you are able to have these mental models, you will be much more specific when you go and talk to someone. You say, okay, so this is the person who really is, now trusting the vision. So this is where I need to inspire him with a bit of outcome. So you go into that session, not talking about all your difficulties, but you will get towards what is possible, and in order to create motivate that person. But then if, let's say, halfway you observe the person's energy shifted and the person is indeed excited and convinced, once you do is now you need to shift your specific influencing style to going to the idea of perhaps this is where we can co-construct, we can negotiate on our working terms, and etc. So with that mental model in the back of your mind, you will be able to bring out that different type of different specificity in your toolkit in order to serve your overall agenda. And that agenda or that intention itself is coming from those three questions again. It's about who am I? And it's not that easy, right? We are not always playing the same character in the same script. I might be a mother, for example, with my daughter, and I might be a speaker, or I am a podcaster at this moment. And I need to remind myself that, okay, I am a podcaster, so do what I need to do here. So that's the second question. Where am I? I am in my role. So when I'm very aware of who I am, where I am, and also what am I doing. It brings me back into the sense of how I can better serve and act in this role. So one example is a lot of times, let's say we are giving a public speech or we are I remember there was once I was doing a public speech or when a seminar with a global flight audience physically and also virtually. And it was very hard because it was just after COVID and uh, I was not used to live audience actually, so I was very attracted by them, and I kind of ignored my virtual audience quite a bit. And then there were a lot of questions rolling in the chat room, and I got quite overwhelmed. And there was a moment I felt like I was starting to disconnect. And then these three questions: Who am I? What am I doing? And sorry, the second one, where am I? So what am I doing? It also includes the part about why am I here? Why do I do what I do? Um, I started to relax into that reality that I was really just there to share. I was not there to be a technical expert or someone who needs to pull off a perfect performance. So I just apologized to the high audience that I readjust that saying, um, I have been answering questions from the live audience, and now I need to ask, just address a few questions from the virtual audience as well. That's fun, right? Um, so let me pause a second on what else I had in mind to talk about. One more layer is here. Is on I think how we can grasp that specificity. A lot of times it's about we being able to address what's going on in our mind, those passing thoughts, and those feelings. So just now, I think I talked about my example where I was feeling disconnected, and I caught that, and I came back to that moment and say, "This is what I am here for," and let me continue to live up to my role in this moment. And there are a lot of times also we with those passing thoughts. So today I was coaching a group where they are leaders and then they are learning how they can coach others, right? So one of the leaders said after his coaching session and we were debriefing and he said, I felt sadness for my coaches the story he described. I saw that this is such a hopeless problem, and I felt great sadness for him being trapped in this. So then I said, one thing is if you caught this specificity in that moment, what you could have done is one, to reflect back to your coaching. This is such a complex problem. And I really feel your pain. I'm almost feeling, this challenge, right? This alarm. And once you are able to name these specific things, your coach, you will feel a lot more connected with you. And then he was just like beating on his head and say, "Yeah, why didn't I realize it?" And that is what exactly happens is we do get a lot of these inner data from our feelings, our senses, our intuitions. But before we are able to name them and to really hit on the nail, we tend to let it go and we go with the flow. We let the conversation carry us elsewhere. And sometimes after the whole thing, we go home and we say, why didn't I say that in that moment? And that's developing play because we didn't capture that fish and we then let the fish slip from our fingers, right? The other thing is really, it's also part of that mental agility. Sometimes the external situation changed. The other person's gesture, body posture, tone, and a lot of things have changed. So you noticed the person has become disengaged. And yet you choose to continue to say, okay, let me finish whatever I need to talk to the person about. And later, but at the same time, the signal will come back to bind you and nag at you and say, the person is disengaged. The person doesn't want to listen to you, or the person has some question. So this is really where you need to get to your information, that specificity of the other person has a need, and I need to pause to address that need. And that is what makes communication effective, because then we learn to pause and ask, "Hmm, where are we? Did I lose you? Do you have a question?" And that is how we are able to act based on this specificity in our mind, than going after our particular idea or that pre-formed plan. And this is not easy, because all of these things require us to be able to be still when our internal storm of feelings, passing thoughts, external information that comes in, and that entire changing dynamics when we are interacting with the other person. So that requires a few things. If you remember, specificity requires us to learn, to expand our vocabulary, to expand our mental model, to expand our understanding of everything. It could be about thought patterns, it could be about feelings. And so that you don't say, a lot of people would say feelings, and like, I'm feeling not so good. And may ask, what do you mean by not so good? What kind of not so good? And some may say, okay, upset. Okay, what kind of upset? And there are people who are much more savvy or have a richer vocabulary of emotions. They will say there's disappointment, there's sadness, there's sense of betrayal, there's anger, there's regret, right? So when we are able to label our feelings differently in the more specific way, we will be able to better grasp all those passing feelings. And thinking is the same, right? If we have different thought patterns, am I criticizing? Am I assessing? Am I penalizing? Am I rationalizing? So there could be a lot of different act as well. And passing thoughts could also be about the nature of it, such as, is it a warning? The warning of danger, the warning of disconnect. And when I have this kind of warnings, and my heart is beating very fast, and then I start to have thoughts about, I can't trust this person. That's fine. That is also a thought about his warning. And do I take that seriously and immediately run away from the person? No, but I would hold that piece of data and say, okay, at this moment, I'm not trusting the person. And how do I choose to honor that? One way is that might actually express and say, you just said this, and it's very different from the other thing you told me the other day. And at this moment, I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable. And maybe, can we pause to address this? I'm very times I sense myself with certain tension, and or I'm getting angry with what the other person is saying, and then I have to ask myself, where is this anger coming from? And then that leads me to observe a kind of pattern that the person has been pushing back. And that's where I can sit still and be still and ask, what is I observe a pushback? And again, to honor this understanding, this observation of pushback, there are various ways. One is to express that notice the pushback. But then the other way is sometimes We are not always in a coaching session where I should name it for my client's benefit. And even in coaching session, I may not choose to name it in that first instance, right? So I need to hold that somewhere. And that goes into, being able to distill our thoughts. We actually need a holding space for all the unfinished thoughts to say, okay, there is a part of me not being able to trust. There is a part of me also observing a pattern of pushback from that person. And there is a part of me knowing all this and knowing where I am and what I'm doing at this moment, having a conversation with that person. And so, as time goes by, we choose to decide what to do with all these unfinished thoughts and data that we are holding in this space, guided by our more assessed or more, um, in a way, non-human's approach instead of rushing at any of these data immediately. So that is keeping an archive and choose where to act on it. So I know that it's very abstract and that is getting into a space where I am in my unfinished thoughts about how can I communicate this very complex matter um, to people in your similar way. I don't think I can do that yet, but the good thing is I can always make it very specific. And for example, I give a lot of examples, right? One more example is town hall meeting. I had a particular conversation with someone is going to support his boss to give a town hall meeting, and he anticipates there will be a lot of difficult questions, or maybe there will be some difficult questions about the company going through a restructuring, and there could be people's job being threatened, and he's feeling unease about how he can jump in to contribute to this kind of answering these questions. And as we move along, so when we have this data about unease, what does that mean? That could mean that there is a lack of specificity because one town hall meeting is different from another one. What makes this particular town hall different and distinct? And it could be, set in today's context, it could be about reassuring people, or it could be about to share that brutal truth that some people are going to have to go. Or it could be also about motivating and inspiring people and saying, hey guys, we are all in this same boat. Let's do something. So we will all be much better, right? So I don't know. And that's important. So that is why it's important to get to the specificity of that town hall and get into the specificity of us. What role do you want me to play? Do you want me to be, your kind of your devil's advocate? Because in Chinese saying we say one person needs to sing the black face, one person needs to sing the red face. So here is not about the racial color. It's really about the black face being the bad guy and the other person. It's like I'm always here for you and the positive one. So some have to do such a role play. Um, so yeah, getting into a lot of specifics will always help us. And the last point how specificity I want to make is how we can see another person's specificity. Because if a lot of times we may say, huh, that's a senior person, that's that's a certain race, that's a certain background, come from good business schools, and that he is holding senior roles, so all seniors like that. So that's very stereotypical view of people. And only when we are able to get into the specifics, his background, his personality, his interest, and his unique positioning. Is he new to his job? Does he feel challenged? Or is he at the verge of retirement? And there just will be a huge universe of specificity about every individual. So if we fail to see that uniqueness, we are going to not be able to see the person or honor that complexity. And then as a result, a lot of things we do with that person or communicate with that person are likely not going to land. And then also creates a lot of um, different tension in us because we are essentially or ultimately, if we see that as just a boss, just a senior person, we are not connecting with the person. And we as human beings, we hate to be disconnected. So there's a lot of mistrust that, we affect with, and that's very, very heavy for us to carry. And what can help us is to get into more specificity with everyone else and try to see them and at the same time bring out what is uniquely ours. And only then there is a possibility for true human connection. And that then will help us in improving our communications and improving our interpersonal relationship, bringing our personal branding up to speed. And in fact, strategic thinking as well, because the more we know and understand the other people or the market or the world, the more we are going to be able to be specific in our method or methodology of working around things and thrive from there. And I'm not ready to let go yet because there is this big piece I want to also get to. It's about what doesn't help us in terms of getting to those specificities. Um, there are some common barriers, and I will make a few quick suggestions, and you will see if that helps. One is to catch yourself. Am I focusing on what matters for others at this moment more than what matters for me? So, for example, if I'm in a meeting room, um, and my mind is all over about what others will see, how others will see me, how they will judge me, how can I, give valuable input. That is where we are too obsessed to imagine what's important for others. But in reality, we can't really, we are not really imagine, we are not really understanding what's important for others. We're just imagining, right? So here my suggestion is if we can shift from what I imagine it to be towards what is real. And if we can also shift from what I wish things to be to what is practically possible. And if we can shift from I'm worried about what I don't know and trying to know what I don't know. If we can shift from this towards there's something I do know, and then I'm going to look at it, feel it, own this insight, and put it in my holding space and honor it when I'm ready. So that is the end of today's episode of my unfinished thoughts with your Letty.